I used to think betrayal was something you saw on TV, overwritten, exaggerated, too dramatic to be real. Then I watched it walk into a room full of pastel balloons, cupcakes, and people smiling at my belly. My name is Avery. I'm 31, an Army captain. And last year I learned that the man I married didn't just lie to me. He built a second home on top of mine. And he did it so cleanly that I almost missed the seams. Almost. I met Ethan 5 years ago. Not on some romantic street corner, but at a fundraiser event tied to a military family organization near Post. I was stationed at Fort Moore then, still relatively fresh into company-grade officer life, busy, tired, ambitious, convinced I could outwork any problem. Ethan was easy in a crowd, the kind of man who could make small talk feel like a private conversation. He had that calm confidence people mistake for integrity. He told me he worked in operations for a contracting firm, logistics support, vendor coordination, travel heavy. It tracked. I'd spent my entire adult life around acronyms and job titles that never meant what they sounded like. I didn't fall for him because of his pitch. I fell for him because he paid attention. He remembered tiny things. How I took my coffee, which author I'd mentioned once in passing, the fact that I hated being late for anything. He didn't just act impressed by my career. He acted like it mattered. He told me he admired discipline. He asked about leadership like he actually wanted to understand it. When you're a woman in uniform, you get tired of being treated like a novelty. Ethan never did that. Or if he did it so smoothly I couldn't see it. From the start, his schedule was inconvenient. Ethan was gone a lot. 2, 3, 4 days at a time. Sometimes he'd disappear for a long weekend. He explained it as client sites, last-minute projects, contract deadlines. I didn't love it, but my own life wasn't exactly predictable either. Training cycles, field time, late nights, weekend duties with people who needed guidance and didn't care if I'd slept. We made it work because when he was home, he was present. He cooked. He cleaned without being asked. He listened when I vented about an incompetent superior or a soldier's family situation that kept me up at night. He made my life feel softer. 2 years in, he proposed in the simplest way possible. No crowd, no performance, just the two of us, sitting on the tailgate of his truck after a hike, the sun dropping behind the trees. He didn't kneel like the movies. He just looked at me and said, "I want a life that's real. With you." I said yes. We married the next spring. Nothing extravagant. A small venue, a few dozen people, my parents, my brother, some friends from my unit. His mother came, hugged me like she'd waited years for this, cried through half the ceremony. At the reception, she told me I was good for him. I remember smiling, thinking it was sweet. Now I know what it was. A woman proud that her son could maintain the image of stability, even if it wasn't true. Marriage didn't change Ethan's travel. If anything, it made the excuses smoother. He would leave early Monday, come back Thursday night. Sometimes he'd arrive Friday morning, apologizing with that careful voice men use when they want you to believe they're exhausted for you. Occasionally, he'd take a Charlotte run. That was his phrase. It was always Charlotte, always framed like a necessary evil. Client meetings, site inspections, contract changes. Charlotte was about a 3.5-hour drive. A long day, but not impossible. I assumed he hated it. He acted like he hated it. We texted constantly when he was away. Not just good morning and good night, but little check-ins that made me feel anchored. Photos of hotel coffee, a blurry shot of a conference room, a comment about traffic. Enough proof to keep me calm. I didn't realize proof can be manufactured. I didn't realize I was watching a performance designed to keep me exactly where I was, trusting. I also didn't realize that while I was learning to lead soldiers, he was learning to manage women. We didn't get pregnant right away. It took time, months of hopeful tests and quiet disappointment. I told myself it was stress. My work tempo wasn't kind, neither was my sleep. I was the kind of officer who pushed through everything because slowing down felt like weakness. Ethan, on the other hand, got more affectionate the longer it took. He'd rub my back. He'd tell me it would happen. He'd say we were building something, not rushing it. When I finally saw those 2 lines, I sat on the edge of the bathtub and stared until my eyes burned. Then I laughed, one sharp, disbelieving sound, and pressed a hand to my mouth like I could hold the moment inside me. Ethan was in the kitchen when I told him. He looked at the test, looked at me, and his whole face changed. He hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. He cried. He said he was proud. He said we were going to be a family. And because I wanted to believe in the best version of my life, I believed him. The pregnancy was steady, not effortless, but manageable. Fatigue, nausea, swelling, normal things. Ethan tried to be involved. He came to appointments when he could. When he couldn't, he called from whatever hotel he was pretending to hate. He talked about names, painted the nursery with me on a rare, fully free weekend. He built the crib while I sat on the floor and read instructions like a drill sergeant, joking that he'd fail inspection if he missed a screw. That's the thing about liars. They don't live in permanent chaos. The best ones can build furniture with you while their other life waits quietly in another city. My best friend Kendall insisted on throwing me a baby shower. I argued, half-hearted. I didn't want a big event. I didn't like attention. I didn't love being the center of anything that wasn't my job. Kendall ignored me the way a good friend does when she knows you're trying to deny yourself joy. She booked a room at a hotel near the riverfront in Columbus and decorated it like she'd been planning it for months. The theme was Little Adventurer. Soft blues, cream colors, tiny maps on the tables, a wall of photos from my childhood and my army life, because she insisted the baby would grow up knowing his mother's strength. There were about 35 people. My parents drove in. My brother flew in for a day. A few women from my unit came with gifts and jokes about how I'd run my home like a platoon. Ethan said he couldn't attend the whole thing because he had a client call, but he promised he'd drop by afterward. I hated that I was used to hearing that sentence. At first, the shower was exactly what it should be. Warm, loud, slightly embarrassing in the way baby games always are. People laughed at photos of me as a kid with crooked bangs. Kendall made everyone write advice cards, and half of them were unhelpful and hysterical. I was opening gifts when the door opened. A quiet shift swept the room first. Not silence, but attention, moving like wind. I looked up and saw a woman standing in the doorway holding a young boy's hand. She was poised in a way that looked practiced. Light hair pulled back neatly, simple jewelry, a face that didn't seem confused or lost. She didn't scan the room like someone searching for the right place. She looked straight at me like she already knew exactly where I'd be. She took one step forward, then another, moving through the space as if it belonged to her. The boy, maybe 5 or 6, clung to her fingers and stared at the balloons with wide eyes. Kendall frowned beside me. I could tell by her expression she didn't recognize the woman. The woman stopped near the gift table. She glanced at my belly, then at my face. Her voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. "Are you Avery Caldwell?" she asked. The room went still enough that I could hear a distant clink of a spoon against a glass somewhere behind me. "Yes," I said cautiously. "Who are you?" She took a breath, like she'd practiced this line in the car until it stopped shaking. "My name is Hannah," she said, "and I need you to know something. Because I don't think he told you." My skin went cold. My hands tightened around the tissue paper I'd been holding. Hannah's eyes flicked to the people around us. My family, my friends, strangers who suddenly didn't feel like strangers because all of them were watching. Then she said it. "I'm married to Ethan." For a second, my brain refused to connect the words. I heard them, but they didn't assemble into meaning. Married to Ethan. That sentence didn't fit inside the shape of my world. I stood up so quickly the chair scraped the carpet. "That's not possible," I said. The words came out flatter than I expected, like my mind was trying to keep my voice from giving my body away. Hannah nodded slowly. "I know that's what you want to say," she replied. "But it is." She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone without dramatics. No shaking hands. No tears in that moment. Just precision. She tapped the screen and held it out. A wedding photo. Ethan in a suit I'd never seen, smiling in a way I recognized with nauseating clarity. Hannah beside him in a white dress. A date stamped into the file details when she swiped, 2019. My vision tunneled. The room tilted. I gripped the back of my chair. Kendall stepped forward instantly, voice sharp. "Okay, this is done," she snapped. "You can't come into a baby shower and—" Hannah lifted a hand, gentle but firm. "I'm not here to scream," she said. "I'm not here to fight anyone. I'm here because I found out about you last week, and I needed to see it with my own eyes, because I kept thinking I was losing my mind." She looked at my belly again, and something flickered across her face. "I didn't know you were pregnant," she added quietly. "Not until I saw the photos." Photos. My stomach dropped. Hannah angled the phone again, and now there were more images. Ethan holding the little boy as a toddler. Ethan in front of a house I'd never seen. Ethan sitting at a kitchen table that wasn't ours. Ethan with Hannah. smiling with his arm around her waist. Then Hannah pulled out a folded document. Not a folder like a dramatic reveal, just a paper that looked like it had been held too tightly for too long. "Marriage license," she said simply. "Filed in Mecklenburg County. We live in Charlotte." Charlotte. I felt my chest tighten like a strap had been cinched around it. Charlotte was his problem client. Charlotte was his long weekends. Charlotte was why he missed birthdays, missed holidays, missed half of my life. Hannah shifted slightly, and the boy leaned into her leg. She rested a hand on his shoulder. "This is Owen," she said. "He's Ethan's son." I couldn't hear for a moment, like my ears had filled with water. My hands went numb. My baby kicked once, hard. It felt like a signal from inside me that my body had been trusting the wrong man. I stared at the boy's face and saw it. The curve of his mouth, the same chin Ethan had, the same eyes, proof that didn't need paperwork. Kendall whispered my name like she was trying to anchor me. I didn't look at her. I looked at Hannah. "How long?" I managed. Hannah's throat moved as she swallowed. 4 years married, she said. Together for 5. My stomach turned over. Because my timeline crashed into hers and shattered something inside me that I didn't even know was fragile. Hannah looked down at her own body for a second, then back up, and her voice dropped. "And I'm pregnant too," she said. 21 weeks. A sound escaped my mother. Half sob, half disbelief. My brother swore under his breath. Someone behind me said, "Oh my God," in a tone that didn't sound like sympathy or judgment, just shock at the scale of it. I felt the room closing in. I forced air into my lungs. I asked the question that punched my life all the way open. "When does he come home to you?" I said. Hannah's expression tightened. "He's gone Monday through Thursday," she replied. "He says he works in Georgia. He's home Friday to Sunday, unless he claims he has an emergency project." I stared at her, because my schedule with Ethan was the mirror image. He was with me most weekdays, and travel swallowed the weekends. I didn't faint. I didn't scream. I didn't do anything cinematic. I just stood there, 8 months pregnant, in a room full of people who loved me, and realized my marriage had been a rotation schedule. Kendall cleared the room like she was executing a plan. She ushered guests out gently but firmly, calling Ubers, handing out leftovers, telling people we'd follow up later. My mother wanted to stay. My brother refused to leave. Kendall held both of them in place with a look that said, "Not right now." Somehow, Hannah stayed too. Not because she forced it, because I looked at her and realized she was the only person in that building who truly understood the depth of what had just happened. We moved into a smaller private space off the hallway. Just us, Kendall, my mother, my brother, and Hannah with Owen. I sat on a sofa like my bones had turned to sand. Hannah opened her purse again and pulled out more papers. Bank statements with both her and Ethan's names, a mortgage document, insurance forms, Owen's birth certificate. It was a life, a full, documented life. My brother paced. Kendall's jaw was clenched so tightly I could see the muscle jump. My mother cried quietly, wiping her face with a napkin from the dessert table like she couldn't find anything else to hold her together. I asked Hannah how she found my name. She told me she searched for the hotel venue online after seeing the photo, then searched the shower registry. I didn't want to believe it, she admitted. I kept hoping I was wrong. I kept thinking maybe he had a cousin, maybe a friend, maybe something. I nodded, because my brain understood that denial is a shelter people run into when reality feels lethal. Then I told her the truth from my side, where we lived, how often Ethan said he traveled, how he claimed Charlotte was a client, how he promised he was going to stop taking so many weekend calls once the baby arrived. Hannah's mouth tightened. He said the same thing to me, she murmured. We compared details like officers building a case file. 2 phones? Yes. Social media barely used? Yes. Work explanations vague but consistent? Yes. Money that seemed fine but was always in motion? Yes. We lined up dates, and I watched the shape of Ethan's deception come into focus like a map. It wasn't chaotic. It was engineered. Hannah stared at my hands at one point and said, "You're calm." I almost laughed. "I'm not calm," I told her. "I'm trained not to fall apart in front of people." I didn't say what I was thinking, because it felt too raw. If I fell apart, my baby might feel it, so I stayed upright. Not because I was strong, because I had no choice. 2 days later, Hannah and I met again, this time without family, without friends, without anyone who would try to talk us into softness. We met at a cafe halfway between where she was staying and where I was, And we did what we should have done months ago with Ethan. We verified. We hired a private investigator. Not some dramatic TV character. A former law enforcement woman with a practical voice and a calm face who didn't blink when we told her the story. She asked for names, addresses, phone numbers, any account info we had, the kind of questions that felt clinical. I liked her immediately. Within a week, she called us into her office. "There's another woman," she said as soon as we sat down. Hannah's hand tightened around her water bottle. I stared straight ahead. "Not a second wife," the investigator added, "but a long-term partner. Different city, different story. Her name was Brianna. She lived in Florida. She thought Ethan was separated and finalizing the paperwork. She'd been seeing him for nearly 3 years. 3 years. The investigator slid photos across the desk. Ethan at a beach. Ethan in a restaurant I'd never been to. Ethan smiling with a woman who didn't look like a fling. He looked like a man living the life he wanted while the rest of us carried the costs. The investigator continued, flipping pages. "Financial situation is worse than it appears," she said. "He's juggling debt. He's moving money between accounts. There are loans tied to Hannah's property that Hannah didn't authorize." Hannah went pale. "There's also an account activity pattern that suggests he's been opening credit in other names," the investigator added, looking at me. My stomach tightened, because I understood immediately what that meant. A soldier learns early. If someone can lie cleanly, they can steal cleanly too. The investigator didn't use dramatic words. She didn't need to. She showed us numbers. She showed us paperwork. She showed us the part of Ethan's life that wasn't romance or family. Just leverage, just risk, just collapse. When she finished, she leaned back slightly and said, "You both have options." She looked at me first. "You can keep this private and handle it through civil court," she said. "Or you can escalate and pursue criminal charges for the fraud. Bigamy depends on jurisdiction and proof. The unauthorized loan is a serious issue." Hannah exhaled shakily. I didn't feel shaky. I felt cold. Not numb. Cold. The kind of cold I felt in moments where I realized something wasn't going to be solved with kindness. Hannah looked at me. I looked back. And we didn't have to say it out loud for it to be true. We were done being used. We didn't rush into confrontation. We built it. Hannah and I met with attorneys in separate states, then coordinated. We collected our documents. We secured our accounts. We moved any valuables we could prove were ours. We documented everything. We told the investigator to keep watching Ethan's movements. And then we did something that felt like betrayal in reverse. We acted normal. I called Ethan and let my voice crack just enough to sound real. I told him I felt overwhelmed. I told him pregnancy anxiety was hitting harder than I expected. I told him I needed him. He responded exactly the way a man responds when he thinks control is slipping. Immediately. He drove home that night, brought me takeout, held my face and told me he loved me. He said all the right words because he'd practiced them for years. I nodded like I believed him, because sometimes deception is a tool, and I was finally done being the only one disarmed. Hannah did the same on her end. She told Ethan she wanted to do something meaningful before their second baby arrived. Not a ceremony. Something smaller, less theatrical. A private dinner, photos, a little celebration. Ethan loved the idea. Not because he was sentimental, because he thought it meant his lie was still intact. We scheduled everything for the same evening. Same building. Adjacent suites. We told Ethan 2 different stories. To me, a special dinner to reconnect before the baby arrived. To Hannah, a family evening with Owen, and a quiet announcement of the new baby's name. Same time, same hour, 2 doors. One man. He couldn't be in both places without being exposed. We didn't care which door he picked. We cared that he'd walk into the truth. I arrived early. Slow steps. Deep breaths. Kendall was with me. My brother was nearby, not inside the room, because we weren't trying to create a scene. We were trying to create a record. Hannah was next door with her attorney and another witness. The connecting door between the suites was unlocked. We could hear muffled hallway sounds through the walls. Ethan called me and told me he was behind because of traffic. He called Hannah and told her the same. At a certain point, the waiting stopped feeling like strategy and started feeling like physics, like the universe was holding its breath. Then we heard footsteps. A pause. A man's voice. Low, familiar. Speaking into a phone in the hallway. Which suite? Okay, I see it. The door next to us opened. Not mine. Hannah's. I felt something sharp in my chest. Not heartbreak, not exactly. More like confirmation. The door closed. We heard his voice. Warm. Practiced. Hey, there you are. I'm sorry, Then silence. Not total silence. The silence of a man seeing something that doesn't belong in his story. Then Hannah's voice, level and controlled. Sit down, Ethan. A chair scraped. Then Ethan, uncertain. What is this? That was my cue. I stood up and walked to the connecting door. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. My baby shifted, heavy and present, reminding me what mattered. I opened the door. Ethan turned, and I watched his face break through several layers of emotion so fast it looked like someone tearing paper. Confusion, recognition, fear. He whispered my name like it was a hallucination. Avery. I stepped into the room. Hannah was standing on one side of the table. I stood beside her. 2 pregnant women, 1 man, and lawyers who weren't there to negotiate feelings. Ethan looked like he might sit down. Then he looked like he might run. His eyes darted to the door, to Hannah, to me. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Hannah's attorney slid a stack of papers toward him. This is service, the attorney said. You're being notified officially. You can accept now, or you can be served another way. It will not change the outcome. My attorney placed a second stack beside the first. Ethan's hands hovered above the papers like they were hot. Hannah's attorney continued, voice calm. There are also filings regarding unauthorized financial activity tied to Hannah's property. Ethan's head snapped up. Hannah's eyes didn't flinch. And filings regarding fraudulent accounts connected to Avery's identity, my attorney added. Ethan stared at me. He looked like he wanted me to save him. I didn't move. He tried to speak. This is, you don't understand. Hannah cut him off. Oh, we understand, she said, quiet and deadly. We understand more than you thought we could. My attorney added, there are communications prepared for law enforcement. Depending on how quickly this proceeds, your arrest can happen soon. Ethan's face drained. He whispered, please. Hannah didn't react. He turned to me, eyes wet, voice breaking. Avery, please. Think about the baby. Think about... Stop, I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Do not use my child as a shield for your choices, I told him. You've used everyone else long enough. Ethan's shoulders shook slightly as if he'd suddenly remembered how to feel. He reached for an explanation like a drowning man reaching for air. I didn't plan it, he said, frantic now. It started with a mistake, and then I couldn't fix it. I didn't want to lose anyone. Hannah laughed once, no humor in it. You didn't want to lose the benefits, she corrected. You wanted 2 homes, 2 sets of resources, 2 women keeping you stable, and you wanted to keep adding backups. One of the lawyers on the far end of the room stood. I also represent Brianna, she said. You will be hearing from us as well. Ethan looked like he'd been punched. He sank into the chair finally. He picked up the papers, eyes jumping over the first page like his mind couldn't hold it. He began to cry. Not quiet tears, big, ugly sobs that felt designed to trigger sympathy. I felt none. Hannah's attorney said, you will vacate the residence in Charlotte within 24 hours. My attorney said, you will vacate the residence in Georgia as well. You will not contact Avery outside of approved communication channels going forward, Hannah added, voice steady. Owen stays with me. That is not negotiable. Ethan looked up like he couldn't believe what was happening. I'm their father, he croaked. You were supposed to act like it, Hannah replied. I stared at him and felt something settle inside me, like a lock sliding into place. This is the last time you get to be surprised, I told him. From now on, consequences arrive on schedule. Hannah and I walked into the hallway together, moving slow, because pregnancy makes everything slow. As soon as the door shut behind us, we both broke, not falling apart in public, not screaming, not collapsing to the floor, just crying in that quiet way women cry when they've been carrying too much too long. Kendall was there. My brother was there. Hannah's friend was there with Owen. I put my hand against the wall, breathing through it like labor practice. Hannah pressed her forehead to mine for a second like we were soldiers sharing a moment before going back into combat. We're going to be okay, she whispered. I didn't answer with comfort. I answered with truth. We're going to be different, I said, but we're going to be okay. Ethan didn't disappear politely. He tried to bargain, tried to plead, tried to make it about love, tried to make us feel guilty for tearing the family apart, as if we had built the lie. The legal process was exhausting. It wasn't fast. It wasn't clean, but it was real. And for the first time in years, reality was on our side. I gave birth in late fall to a healthy baby boy, Jack. He had Ethan's eyes, which hurt in a way I can't describe without sounding dramatic. Hannah's daughter arrived in winter. Owen became a big brother with the serious pride only a little kid can carry. Brianna pursued her own case and kept her distance. I didn't blame her. Not everyone wants friendship after betrayal. Some people want space. Hannah and I, strangely, became close. Not because we were bonded by a buzzword, because we had the same problem. Rebuilding a life while learning how easily trust can be weaponized. We talked often, shared resources, shared baby clothes, shared the kind of dark jokes that only make sense when you've lived through something that should not be real. Our kids grew up seeing each other. And when Owen asked why Dad wasn't around like other dads, Hannah didn't poison him. She told him age-appropriate truth. That's grown-up business, she'd say. And you're safe. That mattered to me, because I refused to raise my son inside a cycle of lies, even if the truth was ugly. About 2 years after the shower, my life looked different. Not perfect, just honest. I was still in the army, still leading, still tired, still moving forward. I went on a few cautious dates, the kind where you ask questions you used to think were paranoid. One evening, I left a small dinner with a man who seemed steady. Normal job, normal stories, no polished mystery. We requested a rideshare. When the car pulled up, I opened the back door, slid in, and looked up. The driver's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. Ethan. He looked thinner, older, like sleep didn't come easily anymore. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then he said my name like he wasn't sure he was allowed to. Avery. I didn't greet him warmly. I didn't insult him. I simply acknowledged the fact. Ethan. My date leaned forward slightly, confused, sensing something. Ethan cleared his throat. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. I'm trying, he said quietly. I'm working. I'm rebuilding. I stared at the seat in front of me because I didn't owe him my eyes. How's Jack? He asked after a long moment. Healthy, I said. Loud. Stubborn. Ethan exhaled shakily. You know the legal boundaries. I cut in. Don't try to rewrite them in a car. He nodded. There was a silence so thick it felt like pressure. Then he said, I think about it. About what I did. I didn't soften. You should, I replied. We reached my address. The car stopped. I opened the door. Before I stepped out, I leaned forward slightly, just enough for my voice to land cleanly. Become a man your kids won't be ashamed of, I told him. Not for me. Not for Hannah. For them. Ethan's throat moved. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't say, it's okay, because it wasn't. I shut the door. We walked toward the building, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something that surprised me. Not forgiveness, not closure, just clarity. My life had been stolen from me for years, but it wasn't stolen anymore. It was mine again. The army teaches you a lot about danger, not just the kind you see on the news, the quiet kind. The kind that wears a smile and says the right words and learns your routines. The kind that survives because people don't want to look too closely. I learned that love without honesty is not love. I learned that a family built on lies is not a family. And I learned this most of all. You can be pregnant, terrified, humiliated, and still choose yourself, even if you have to choose yourself in a room full of balloons and witnesses. Especially then.